The Wheel and the Butterfly. Written by Justice4243. Read by SunGuard.
And Moonguard.
Shut up, you. Chapter 7. Dan versus ... Chris stifled a yawn and pulled into his driveway. He sighed, looking up at the giant covering over his house, garage, and shed. He wasn't too perturbed by the idea that his domicile now resembled a giant circus tent, but the constant fear of being exposed to a lethal dose of radiation was starting to take its toll. Chris climbed out of his car, walked to the back of his property, opened up a large zipper in the back, revealing a clear box room with a hazmat suit in it. He stepped in the room, closed the zipper, and began putting the suit on. Once finished, he opened a clear door that led to his backyard. Through the clear suit of plastic of the suit, he viewed the floodlights and claxons that now decorated his yard, making it feel more like a prison yard or the site of a top-secret government dig site. He trudged back around to the front of the house and tried to open the front door.
Locked. Of course it's locked.
He reached for his keys and felt protective layers against more protective layers. Much to his frustration, he had suited up with everything still in his pockets.
Come on!
Chris shouted and mentally prepared himself to go back into the box room. Suddenly, the door unlocked and opened him. "Hey, Chris," his red-haired wife greeted him, similarly dressed in a hazmat suit. "You suited up with your keys in your pockets again, didn't you?" Chris laughed nervously and stepped inside his house. Elise stood up on the tips of her toes, put her faceplate against his, and kissed her faceplate, leaving a visible smooch mark on the inside, about the closest she could get to affection at the moment. "Did you have a nice time with Dan's revenge scheme?" Chris smiled through the clear plastic suit.
Dan and I stopped a mugger,
he said cheerfully. "Really?" Elise asked with increased interest. Any these two don't get arrested or end up on the news is a plus, but I think they actually accomplished them good.
Dan set him on fire and I hit him with the car,
Chris added with no small amount of pride in his voice. Elise managed to keep her smile, but her eyes shifted to show some concern.
"Oh,"
Chris added.
"and we saved the poor girl that was being attacked."
Elise's expression softened. "That's very nice, Chris. I'm sure she was very grateful."
"Yep, we got her set up with the apartment next to Dan's."
Elise's expression went serious. "I thought you said you saved her,"
Haha.
Chris said as he rolled his eyes.
"She practically begged to be next to Dan. She got her paperwork done, paid her deposit and first month's rent, and got the keys right away."
Chris stared off into space, as little as he could before vision met clear plastic, and added,
"She seems hell-bent on making friends with Dan. I said I'd stop by tomorrow to make sure she was okay."
"Huh," Elise muttered. "There's something very suspicious about all this. How would you describe her?" Elise asked, cocking an eyebrow at her husband. Chris attempted to rub his chin with his hand, but only succeeded in rubbing a gloved hand on the plastic in front of his face.
"Hyperactive, nice, clumsy, and the most clueless person I have ever met."
Chris paused and made eye contact with his wife.
"She's about an inch shorter than you, with long pink curly hair that billows out in all directions."
Elise smiled, stood on her toes again, and patted the top of her husband's suit. "You've been practicing what I told you about profiling, I see." Chris chuckled nervously. Elise thought more about this. "Well, it doesn't really sound like the cover of someone trying to get close to a target." "What was her name?" Elise asked.
"Pinky."
Chris replied. He continued rubbing the clear plastic under his face and looked off as he tried to remember something.
"Pinkamena Diane Pie."
He put on an aha face and pointed to the sky, signifying the name that had just come back to him. "That's a rather strange name," Elise commented.
"Well, she's a strange girl."
Chris replied. "You say she paid for her apartment?"
"Yep."
Chris sat down on the couch and turned on the TV. Local news popped on and started detailing a man who was picked up off the street with third-degree burns and multiple broken bones.
"Full in cash."
He added. "That's a lot of money to be walking around with."
"Yeah, and she has a lot more. Dan and I still haven't figured out where she got it all from."
Chris pondered this for a moment.
"She didn't even seem to know what it was. Even Dan thinks she's a talking horse from another dimension."
Elise paused. She wasn't sure how to respond to that. She decided some research was in order. "Oh, I just remembered. I need to double-check on the plutonium."
"That's great, honey,"
Chris said, plastering on a fake enthusiastic smile.
"I think I'm gonna grab my PJs, get changed in the box, then pray we don't die before going to bed,"
he said in a worried sort of mock attempt at his regular cadence. Elise smiled, bent down, and planted another kiss on her faceplate. "Don't wait up," she said sweetly. Chris yawned.
"I'm sure I can manage drifting into a radioactive zombie attack nightmare filled sleep all by myself."
Pinky awoke as the first strands of sunlight entered her new apartment. The daylight didn't exactly improve it, and in fact, she could now fully appreciate how dingy it really was. She walked towards the window and looked out. At least it seems like it's gonna be a nice day with no rain. I wonder if they have flying humans that take care of the weather. Still, not that much to look at. These buildings are in desperate need of some color, like pink, or light red, or even fuchsia. Oh, looky, palm trees, lots of palm trees. I really need to do something to thank Dan. A gift? A cake? A party? She heard a door open, followed by a familiar tone of grumbling. She ducked low and glanced outside. As Dan walked by, she felt the initial urge to run out and greet him. He doesn't look like much of a morning person, and he really doesn't need more reason to be mad at me. She looked up as he walked by. Dan turned and faced her window, and just as quick, Pinky ducked out of sight. Dan's eyebrows twitched as he turned back and continued his walk down the stairs and towards his red hatchback. Pinky discreetly watched from her window as Dan opened one of the backseat doors, looking inside, letting out an angry and frustrated cry, slammed it shut, and turned around back towards the apartment. Pinky let out an audible, and stroked her chin. As Dan walked by, he glanced at her window, and Pinky ducked down again. Dan silently walked up, cupped his hands around his eyes, and attempted to peer in. Pinky cupped her hands over her mouth and kept silent, sweating silently. "All right, be cool, Pinkie Pie. If he catches you spying on him, he's definitely going to yell at you." Dan shook his head, let out an exasperated sigh, and walked back to his apartment, closing the door hard behind him. Pinky stood back up and stared at Dan's car, her lips slowly curled into a smile, which grew into a full-toothed grin. "I have an idea." Chris walked up the stairs to Pinky and Dan's apartments. Elise had insisted he go out and visit Pinky nice and early, and he even went so far as to prepare a set of his standard outfit for him. Chris was just happy to be out of his hazmat suit. Elise said she'd be finished soon, at least. Chris walked past Pinky's door on the way to Dan's, but stopped when he heard her voice.
Maybe she's on the phone.
Chris rapped a few times on Pinky's door. He heard a, "Gotta go!" a loud thump, and a rapid pitter-patter of legs and arms propelling a body across the carpet. Pinky opened the door, still on her knees. Pinky sprung to her feet. "Hiya, Chris," she said in a tone of unbridled cheerfulness. Her bandage was worse for wear, and she was still covered in bruises, but she seemed even happier and more energetic compared to the night prior.
"Hiya, Pinky,"
Chris echoed.
"Dan kicked you out, huh?"
"Oh, it's okay," Pinky said, glancing at Dan's door. "I was asking a bit much that I stay with him. He did say I could get to his help if something bad happened," she said with a humongous grin.
"Really?"
Chris purred, sending a bemused look at Dan's door. Just then, Dan's door slammed open, revealing a red-eyed, angry-looking Dan. "Chris, I need my flyers. I think they're still in your car." "Dan!" Pinky said, enthusiastically throwing her arms around his neck, pulling her camera out of seemingly nowhere, and snapping a photo while Dan angrily shouted in her ear. Dan squirmed out of Pinky's grasp as she giggled with closed eyes and put her hands back behind her back.
"Good morning to you too, Dan,"
Chris said flatly. "Do you have any idea what time it is?" Dan screamed in frustration at Pinky. "I most certainly don't," Pinky answered helpfully.
"It's 9:30, Dan."
Chris answered, his voice still flat. "It's 9, Dan glared at Chris and then turned back to Pinky. "It's too early for all this huggy nonsense." Dan turned back to Chris, his expression still enraged. "Keys, now!" Chris sighed and handed Dan his keys as Dan trudged down the stairs towards Chris's car. Pinky leaned in close to Chris. "Chris, I need your help, but I want it to be a surprise for Dan. Is there a craft store and someplace I can get a photo developed around here?" she whispered into the tall man's ear.
"Of course, Pinky. It's kind of early for Dan anyways."
Chris looked down at his friend, who was in the process of retrieving his flyers. Pinky steepled her fingers in front of her face. "Perfect. Steps 1 and 2 complete," she mumbled to herself. "Oh, almost forgot." Pinky rushed back inside and closed her door behind her. Dan trudged back up the stairs, a stack of flyers in his hand. "Just what are you two scheming anyway?" Dan asked as he narrowed suspicious-looking eyes at Chris.
"How should I know?"
Chris replied. He quickly put back on a smile and changed the subject.
"Hey, wanna grab lunch with us later? It's a beautiful day, and I'm sure Pinky would love to help you put up your flyers."
"No, you're dead to me, and I hate her. Operation Apostrophe Annihilation will continue without you." Pinky threw open her door, holding her bag, now wearing her boots that looked like they were laced by a first grader who attempted tying them while rolling uncontrolled down a rocky hillside. "Ready," Pinky said enthusiastically. Dan looked up and down at her as if seeing her for the first time this morning. Of course you can't tie shoes worth anything. And that bandage looks like it wandered off the set of a zombie apocalypse movie. Walking corpse, Dan said, glancing at Chris. Wait here. Pinky let out a little eep as Dan grabbed her by the hand, dragged her into his apartment, and shut the door, locking it behind him. Chris walked up to the door with a look of concern. There was an apology, some yelling, more apologies, more yelling, some shrieking.
Dan?
Chris called in concern. The sound of a startled cat, Dan moaning, Why? Some giggling, more shrieking, the sound of something crashing the door. Dan! Open the...
Dan, open the door!
Chris tried the locked knob and banged on the door a few times. Some muffled sobbing, some grumbling, more apologies.
Dan, I swear I will break down this door if you...
The door flew open and Pinky stumbled into Chris's chest to steady the dizzy girl. You're welcome! Dan shouted from the open doorway, pushing Pinky's pink bag outside and slamming the door. Pinky shook her head as if clearing it, filled the fresh bandage, and looked at her properly tied boots. She reached down and grabbed her bag, looked up with a huge smile, and shouted, Thank you! At the closed door. Chris just looked at the door with a blank expression. Let's go, Pinky said, her voice overflowing with enthusiasm. Chris followed close behind. Wah! Pinky exclaimed in surprise as she attempted stairs as a human for the first time. Lucky for her, Chris grabbed a hold of her arm before she could tumble all the way down. Pinky steadied herself on the rail and looked up with an embarrassed expression. Thank you, Chris. Could you, Pinky smiled meekly, help me down the stairs?
Sure, Pinky,
Chris replied with a smile. Pinky steadied herself by wrapping an arm around Chris's torso and grabbing the rail in the other. Carefully, the two made it down the stairs and towards the car. Pinky stood in front of the same door she was using last night. Chris opened his door and unlocked the car.
You can ride shotgun if you like.
Pinky stared at him blankly. Chris motioned to his passenger seat. Pinky gasped, I thought that was Dan's seat. Chris smiled warmly.
He's not here right now. Besides, he usually has to sit in back if Elise is with us.
Oh, who's Elise? Pinky asked excitedly, walking over to the passenger seat. Pinky and Chris entered the car and buckled up, Pinky still smiling to herself every time she successfully got her seatbelt buckled.
Oh, right, I haven't told you about my wife.
Dan watched as Chris's car pulled out and into traffic. He grumbled and felt the fresh Mr. Mumbles scratch on his face. He turned back to his bed, fell face first on it, and soon was snoring away once more. He woke to an enthusiastic knock on the door. What is she? Punishment from God? He rose to his feet, grumbled, and looked at the clock by his bed. 1 o'clock. Well, at least it's now a time when civilized people are up and about. He opened the door to be greeted by Pinky's beaming face, smudged with pink paint. Pinky spit out a paintbrush with a similar shade of pink she was holding in her teeth and greeted Dan with her renewed zeal. Hey, Dan, did you get enough sleep? Huh? Did you? Oh, Dan grunted in reply, rubbing his eyes with his thumb and forefinger. What do you want, pink girl? I wanted to thank you and Chris by treating you to lunch. Chris says there's this place called Lenny's down the street. Oh, please say you'll come, please, please, please. Pinky cupped her hands, brought them up to her cheek, and tilted her head, so she was now looking up and down with her big, toothy grin.
Taco.
Shut up, Moonguard. Dan's stomach growled in response. Pinky stood up straight, closing her eyes and smiling wider while keeping her cupped hand by her cheek. Dan grimaced in response, narrowed his eyes, and said, No. He softened his tone to something a little more even for a change. But please choke on something and diet your meal, he said with a smile, holding up a finger. Oh! Dan leveled his finger at Pinky. And tell Chris to do the same. Okie dokie Loki! Well, you know where to find us if you want to come and walk our corpses, Pinky added with a smile. Pinky bounded off, almost slipped down the stairs, caught herself on the rail, and slowly made her way to Chris's car.
He said no, huh?
Chris asked as Pinky sat down on the passenger seat and happily buckled up. He asked that we both choke and die on our meals, Pinky said, still smiling.
Sounds about right.
He'll come around, Pinky insisted. Do you think he'll be surprised, do you? He asked, looking over his shoulder.
Oh, he'll be surprised, all right,
Chris said with a knowing, mischievous grin. Dan watched the blue car pull away for a second time that day. Whatever, I have a war to fight. Lousy deserter, Chris. He grabbed his flyers and walked out the door, shielding his eyes from the sun of the... His eyes opened wide and he gasped. My car! He exclaimed, crouching next to it, and seeing that his red hatchback had been turned pink. Bedazzled! He hissed at the colorful plastic jewels arranged in the shape of hearts on the side of his car. His face turned red with anger. Oh, that's the last straw. It is on! Pinky balled his hands into fists, threw his arms into the air and shouted to the heavens, Pinkie Pie! End of this chapter.